So I have sort of a final question here, which actually could have been the first question uh, in our discussion. But what I'd like to ask you is, what is the ultimate goal of Stoic philosophy? Because people think about it in different ways. So there's this saying, follow nature. So is the ultimate goal of Stoicism to follow nature? Is it to achieve peace of mind and lead a happy life? Or is it to develop your character in some way? And is it even possible that all those things could be related in some way?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think they definitely are all related. So, I mean, what's the ultimate goal? I think the ultimate goal is happiness, or eudaimonia. So to live a good life. Um, that's really what the Stoics and many other ancient philosophers will say. That's the thing that we're all after, whether we realize it or not. That's what the whole thing's trying to get us to. How do you do that? Well, you do that by developing your character. You do that by developing that those virtues, those excellences. Right? How do you be a good human being? By developing the excellent character traits that mark out a good human being. That also involves developing your rationality, because they think that's one of the kind of essential characteristics of a human being. Avoiding those negative emotions, and so escaping the mental illnesses, if you like, of irrational emotions, and then living in harmony with nature is closely connected to this as well, in two ways, I think. So in one way, picking up on what we were saying earlier about aligning your will with the will of nature in order to live a smooth flow of life. How can you live a good, happy, calm, content life if you're constantly struggling with nature? So you've got to live in harmony with nature in order to avoid that discord. But also there's a sense in which living in harmony with nature is closely connected to the project of trying to understand nature, right? Trying to know how nature works. Once you've got that knowledge, once you've done that work, and I think the Stoics would be committed to the broadly kind of Aristotelian idea, right? That we're naturally rational, inquisitive beings. If you're going to be a good human being, you're going to exercise your reason. And part of that is going to involve trying to understand the world around you, right? That's just part of what a good, rational human being would do. They'd engage in science, right? I mean, that's certainly sort of Aristotelian view, but I don't think the Stoics are particularly far away from that. And many Stoics did engage in science, in scientific research. People like Posidonius and Cleomedes and various others. So they were Seneca as well in the Natural Questions. They're all doing this. They want to understand the natural world. And so if you do understand how the natural world works, if you're engaging in that kind of intellectual work, then inevitably you're going to want to live in accord with that knowledge you've gained about the way the natural world works.
Right. I think that's very important. And while we may not look at the world in exactly the same way that the Stoics did, we do have a lot to learn from them in terms of the idea of natural law, I think, and the idea that in some way our own rationality is based in the type of rationality that we find in nature. Otherwise, you're dealing with a large philosophical question of emergence, like how did human rationality come into existence if there was no predecessor for that within the structure of the natural world? And it's like Marcus Aurelius says, that it's not possible to understand yourself if you don't understand the world. So the study of nature, I think, is very important, not only for the Stoics, but for us today, because we obviously need to understand the world in which we live.